college algebra. Okay? So put this formula A times F to the CX minus H plus K. And how are you going to do these transformations? Okay, the first is A. What's out in front? It tells me if it's a negative, if A is less than 0, which means it's negative, right? Correct? It's going to reflect across the x-axis. So that little R with the X means reflect across the x-axis, okay? Secondly, you're going to look at H and K. H and K.
What if it's greater than 0?
That would be positive, wouldn't it? Then I didn't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah. HK means, it's shifting right, left, up, or down, correct? Right, left is HK is up and down. And third is C. C tells you if it's reflected across the y-axis. And I really like this because I'm a concrete sequential person. I go from here to here to here. It just seems to help me, okay? Makes sense? Now we're going to do it. So this first one, is there anything in front other than 1? No. So there's no reflecting across the x-axis. Okay? Then we do H and K. Well, there's H and there's K. So what are we doing to the H? We're going right to, right? Remember, it's an imposter inside the parentheses. Right to, and then what's the negative 3 do? Down 3. So that's your transformations right there. Is there anything in front of the X besides a 1? No, so there's no reflecting across the Y. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, now, the next one. Does everybody agree with me? This was a quadratic, correct? Quadratic, y equals x squared. And this one here is an absolute value function, isn't it? So like if you wanted to, you can get your calculators out and we can go to this first one, okay? And clear this out, correct? Put your parent function into the quadratic, right? Here's your quadratic. There's your quadratic function right there. There's your parent function, agreed? Y equals x squared is here, agreed? Now let's put the other one in, okay? So y equals, parentheses, x minus 2, so x minus 2, close parentheses, the power of 2. Got a right arrow, and then minus 3. Everybody get that? Everybody get it? Now hit graph and see if it shows that the other graph is shifted right 2 and down 3. Is it? Is it shifted? Right 2, down 3, isn't it? Correct? Okay, let's look at the next one. This one here's an absolute value. So here's the parent function for the absolute value. Okay? So, step 1, we look here. What does that tell me is going to happen to the graph? It's going to be what? There's a negative there. It's going to be reflected across the x-axis, agreed? Number 2, I look at H and K. So I look at H. What's H? -5. So does everybody agree with me? We're going to go left 5. Correct? Am I going to do any shifting up or down? Is there anything out here? No. Is there a negative in front of the X inside the absolute value? No. So there's no reflecting across the Y. Okay? So let's graph it. So go back in there, clear, clear. Let's put the parent function in. Remember, go math, arrow over to number. Number 1 is absolute value, correct? Type in X, hit graph. There's your parent function. And then now we're going to put in, X is right below. Yeah, you got to be here, buddy. You got to be here. Because, I mean, we go so fast in this class. That's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to keep up. Kids, I want to say this too, is this unit is the hardest one we'll do all year. You have got to be locked in, okay? This is the hardest one. After that, it's not going to be bad. 1A is the toughest unit. So you're going to have to really focus in here. I'm going to teach the whole hour today. I'm going to do those worksheets with you, okay? And I'm going to go through these steps every time. You're going to get tired of me saying, okay, number 1, is it reflected across the x-axis? Is it shifted right or left? Is it reflected across the y-axis? Every time. Okay? All right, now let's put in the other one. So this is what you do. Go to y equals, arrow down. So you got to put opposite key, right? Not subtraction symbol. Opposite key, then go to math, arrow over to number, and hit number 1, which is absolute value, and then we want X is right below mode. See where mode is? Type X, and then what was it? X plus 5. Then arrow out of it and hit graph. Okay, is that thing reflected across the x-axis? Is it flipped across the x-axis?
Yeah.
Is it shifted left 5?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys see how I do this now. Isn't that cool?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What? Okay. And I think I showed you this, but I want to review. Every time I would hit zoom 6, zoom standard, to make sure your graphs are box looking. And then if you need to reshape, I'll show you later on if it's not picking up the whole graph, how we can do that. I'll do that later, okay? But I'd always start at zoom 6 and then from there make any changes you need, okay? All right. Okay, so what's the next one? It's an exponential, isn't it? And the example I used was this, wasn't it? Y equals 2 to the x. Is that right? Okay, so start with number 1. Is there a negative in front? No. So this one here is not reflected across the x-axis, so you can cross that out. Number 2, is there anything inside is there anything with this x here, like x minus 5 or plus? There's not anything subtracting or adding to the x, is there?
Okay.
So there's no h, so that means there's no shifting right or left. But what about here? Is there a k? Yes, so I'm going to go up 4, correct? And then, is there a negative in front of the x? Is there a negative right here? That means c is less than 0, correct? There is, isn't it? So this one here is going to be reflected across the y-axis. It's going to be flipped this way. It should be, correct? Well, let's find out. So go to your graphing calculator. So 0.8, hit power, opposite key, well, let's just do the parent function first, sorry. Clear that out. X, correct? So 0.8 to the X, and then you got to arrow down so you get out of that, right? And then hit +4, okay? There's your parent function. Well, just do your parent here. Connie, wake up. 0.8 to the power of X. There's your parent function, okay? And hit graph. There's your parent function. Should start big and get small from left to right, correct? Right? Now let's do your other one.
This is a parent function.
That's the parent function, correct? Because there's nothing, it's just a base to the X power. Now we're going to go 0.8 to the power of opposite of X +4, correct? Does everybody see I got the parent function?
Is the parent function not 2 to the X?
No, because we have a different base.
All right.
This was just an example I used in class, okay? Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And hit graph. So is this one shifted up 4 and reflected across, is it flipped over the y-axis? Yeah, it is, because whatever this value is for X here is going to be over here when it's reflected, correct? It's going to be negated. Okay? So this one here, you went up 4, and it's reflected across the y. Subscript means reflection over the y. Okay, this one here is an absolute value function, right? Agreed? Okay, is there anything in front? Nope. So this one here has no reflecting across the X, correct? Is there anything inside is there any shifting right or left? Nope. So no. What about K? I'm shifting it which way? Down 1. So that would be it for this one, agreed? Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, this one here. This is a quadratic, correct?
Sure.
Y equals X squared. This one here is Y equals the absolute value of X. Okay, is there a negative out in front? Nope, so there's no reflecting across the X-axis. Oh, we got a -3, so that means it's doing what? Right 3, correct? Is there anything out here? Is there a K? No. Is there a negative in front of the X here? No, so I'm done. You guys see the steps I take every time?
He's out here.
Huh?
Something like that.
This in here, the parent function is this. Okay, is there a negative? This is an absolute value function, isn't it? Okay, is there a negative in front?
Yes.
So that means it's reflected across the X. Is there any shifting right or left? No. Is there any shifting up or down? Is there a negative inside with the X? No. So the only thing that happened with him, it reflected across the X-axis. That was it. Yeah.
So if it's inside like the parentheses of absolute value, it reflects across the y?
If it has one like this, okay, that's a quadratic, correct? Watch. This one here is reflected, correct?
Yeah, that's
Across the X-axis, agreed?
yes, sir.
What does that 2 do to it? Stretches it, agreed? Yes or no? Okay. So, step 1, okay? If A is less than 0, which means it's negative, correct?
Yeah.
That means it's going to be reflected across the X, which this one is, correct?
Yes.
Then if the absolute value of A is between 0 and 1, it's a vertical stretch, correct? Agreed? If the absolute value of A is less than 1, then it's a vertical compression. I gave you these notes yesterday, correct? So when this number here, absolute value wise, is either less than 1 or greater than 1, it's going to change the shape of the graph, isn't it? Correct? Yes or no? What does the negative do? It reflects it. Okay? So this one here would be reflected across the x-axis, a vertical stretch of a factor of 2, shifted left 4, down 3, and reflected across the y-axis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't even know if this even works anymore. First one was the linear, agreed? There's the first one, correct? Then the next one was the absolute value function, correct?
Yep.
Right? Then the next one was quadratic, correct? Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Then we did the cubic, correct? Agreed?
Yep.
Then we did the square root function, correct? Then we did cube root function, correct?
Yes, we did.
You have to memorize these. That's part of it. Some of you guys haven't really memorized these, and if you don't do it, it's going to be a different. And I've given you all this stuff right here, Craig. I'll put this in your notes. I've given you everything here. What does K do? Shifts it up. What's negative K do? Down. Plus H means it's an imposter, correct? So it's going to be shifted left H. Minus H means right. What did I tell you the negative in front does? Reflects across the x-axis, agreed?
Yep.
The negative here reflects where?
Y.
And then I gave you this. If A is absolute value is greater than 1, then it's a stretch. If A is between 0 and 1, it's a compression, right? I've given you all that stuff. I will PDF this and put it in the notes for you if you want to look at it. Now, I gave you this now too, didn't I?
Yep.
Correct?
Indeed.
Notice he shows you plus you go left, minus you go which way?
Right.
Right. Positive you go up, negative you go down, correct? All right, let's do one. I'll try this, kids. See if I forgot how to do it. Okay. Okay, so negative, correct?
Yeah, reflect.
That tells me it's going to be reflected across the x-axis, agreed?
Yes, sir.
Correct? That's a +2, which means it's going to go which way?
Left.
Left 2. Agreed?
Yep.
So here's your parent function. -3 squared is 9. -2 squared is 4. -1 is 1. 0, 0. 1, 1. 2, 4, 3, 9. Those are the things I gave you, correct? Let me see okay or not. I don't make a very good window, I know that. If you need to move that other desk, you can. Okay, that's now. If it's reflected across the X, that means I'm going to negate all the y values. It's flipped over the x, so the x's aren't going to change. Which ones are going to change? The y. So, see, it's been a while since I've used this. My back was so jacked up I couldn't. I'm still not doing it. See if this works. Okay. So I'm reflecting across the x-axis, correct? So I'm going to take all the y values and I'm going to negate every one of those y values. Okay? Every one of them. So now it's -9, -4, -1, 0 stays the same, -1, -4, -9. Then I'm going to go which way with the x?
Correct.
Left 2, correct? So I'm going to subtract 2 from every one of those x values. So this one here, I multiplied all the y's by -1, correct?
Yep.
Right, I negated all of them. Now, what am I going to do with the x's? I'm going to add 2. Okay? Every one of those I'm going to add 2. So -3 plus 2 is -1. -2 plus 2 is 0. -1 plus 2 is 1. 0. 2, correct? 1, 2 would be 3. 2 plus 2 is 4. 3 plus 2 is 5. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Is this making sense or no? Correct? Graph paper over here. Feel it. Give me a new page here. See, I don't have my pen with me. Back to my camera here. Okay, I'm just gonna make one up here. Y equals, what was the one I just did? Y equals negative x plus 2. Let's just make this up. Minus 5. Okay? It's a quadratic, yes or no?
Yes.
Agreed?
Yeah. Square.
Y equals x squared, correct? That's your parent function, correct? Agreed? Here's your ordered pairs that I've given you. Agreed? So, -3, 9, -2, 4, -1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9, correct? Did I give you those? Agreed?
Yeah.
So, with this one here, number 1, I look at this. Is there a negative there?
Yes.
So it's going to be reflected across the x,
Yep.
which means I'm going to negate all the y's.
Yep.
Okay? Yes or no? Because it's flipped over the x. That's when you reflect over the x, you negate the y's. If you reflect over the y, you negate the x's. Okay? Then step 2. What's h?
2.
I'm going to go, H is -2, right? Correct? It's always an imposter. Agree? So I'm going to go left 2. And then what am I going to do with
Down 5.
down 5? Okay. So here we go. First, and there's no negative in front of the X, yes or no?
Yeah, there's
So there's no reflecting across the Y. Agreed?
Yeah.
So, first, is it reflected across the X? Yes. So I negate all these Y's. The X's stay the same. I don't do anything with them yet. So, -9, -4, -1, 0, -1, -4, -9. Correct?
Mhm.
So I multiplied all the Y's by -1. That's the same thing as negating. Some of you need to wake up. Okay? All right? Then what am I going to do? Left 2, correct? Which means I'm going to add what to all the X's? 2. Down 5. What am I going to do to all the Y's? Subtract 5, correct? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Correct? And I remember, I went from here to here. Now I'm going to here. Okay, so I'm going to add 2 to all these. -3 plus 2, -1. -2 plus 2 is 0. -1 plus 2 is 1. 0 plus 2 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 2 is 4. 3 plus 2 is 5. Agreed?
What would be like -5?
Is it -2?
So,
Well, you tell me. Did I screw up?
I mean, that's what I was thinking.
So should this be -2?
yeah.
Okay, I agree with you. -3 minus 2 is -5. -2 minus 2 is -4. I didn't have my glasses on. -1 minus 2 is what? -3, correct?
Yeah.
0 minus 2 is what?
-2.
-2.
Yeah.
1 minus 2 is -1. 2 minus 2 is what? 0. And 3 minus 2 is what? 1. It's always an imposter. How many times have I said that inside the parentheses? Does that make sense? Now, what am I going to do to all the Y's? Subtract 5. -9 minus 5 is -14. -4 minus 5 is -9. -1 minus 5 is -6. 0 minus 5 is -5. -1 minus 5 is -6. -4 minus 5 is -9. -9 minus 5 is -14. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And that's steps that you take. Now, let's go back to and see if this is even close to the graph that I had up there with you.
I think I like just using the calculator.
Okay, here's the one that he did. Okay, so does everybody agree with me? He shifted it. He first reflected it, correct? So guys, I'm busting my tail for you here. Some of you kind of giving up. I'm doing the best I can. So bear with me. Okay, this is the one he had up there, correct? Right here. Where'd it go? Is it turned on? It's dead. Okay. That happened. So, here's the parent function. Agree? Correct? I'm just making this up for you. So, step 1, I look at this. Is it negative?
Yeah.
So that means I'm going to reflect across the x-axis. Correct?
Yeah.
This right here. Step 2. H, K. What's H? -2, correct? What's K? 0. So I would go left 2, correct? Is there a negative in front of the X?
No.
So that means there is absolutely no reflecting across the Y-axis. Does everybody see where I'm at now?
Mm-hmm.
So here's your parent function, correct? -3 squared is 9, -2 squared is 4, -1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9. Okay, so step one, reflecting across the X, then you're going to negate all the what?
Why?
The Y's, correct? When you reflect across the X, you negate the Y. When you reflect across the Y, you negate the X. So what does that mean to negate? I'm going to multiply all the Y values by what?
-1.
-1, correct? So this is now -9, -4, -1, 0, -1, -4, -9, correct? Then what am I going to do to all the X values? Subtract 2, correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to subtract 2 from all those. So -3 minus 2 is -5, -2 would be -4, -1 minus 2 is -3, -2, 1 minus 2 is -1, 2 minus 2 is 0, 3 minus 2 is 1. So then I graph those points.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, you said we're multiplying.
Do what now?
You said we're multiplying -1 by Y.
By Y, because I'm because I'm reflecting across the X, so I got to multiply the Y's. Because think about it, if you're it's flipping it over.
Yeah.
Okay, let me make another one up. All right. Let's say we're doing one like this. Here's your parent function, x cubed, right? So I gave you these values to use. -3 cubed is -27. -2 cubed is -8. -1 cubed is -1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 8, 3, 27. Agreed? So let's say I give you one like this. Y equals, parentheses, -x minus 2 cubed plus 4. Okay? So, step one. Is there anything in front?
No.
So there's no reflecting across the X. I can just get rid of that.
Yeah.
Step two, I look at H and K.
Right, two.
HK,
Four.
I'm going to go right to
Four.
up 4, correct?
Yeah.
Is there a negative here?
Yes.
So that means I'm going to reflect across the Y. Is that making sense?
Yes.
So here we go. First, right 2, up 4. So I'm going to have to add 2 to all the what? Add 2 to all the what? X's, and add 4 to all the Y's, yes or no?
Yes.
Correct? See what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Okay, -3 plus 2 is -1, -2 is 0, -1, 1, 0, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, correct? Then I'm going to add what to all the Y's? So it's -23, -4, 3, 4, 5, 12, 31. And then now I'm going to reflect across the Y. So I reflect across the Y-axis, but I'm going to negate all the X's. So that means now I have to multiply all the X's by -1. Is this making sense now?
It is.
Okay, so then all those are going to change signs. 1, 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. And the other ones stay the same. Does that help now?
Yeah.
And you have to do it that, it has to go A in front, then H and K, then the C in front of the X. You have to do it in that order. Does that help now? Okay, because these here are easy. I mean, okay, does everybody agree with this one here? I'm going to reflect across the Y-axis.
Yeah.
That's it. Yes or no?
Yes.
This one here, I'm going to reflect across the X. This one here, I'm going to go up 6. This one here, okay.
A little different.
There's this one here. Is there a negative in front? So there's no reflection. But what is that thing there? The absolute value of that there is between 0 and what?
1.
1, right? So it's a vertical what?
Stretch.
Compression,
Oh.
right? Compression, which means it's getting wider. So when this number here is not 1 or -1, it changes the shape, doesn't it? Agreed? So this one here is going to get wider. Correct?
Yeah.
Here, I see blank looks already. Let me show you something here. I'm not doing, I know when I'm not doing a good job, and I want to do a good job. I'm going to give you 4 types it could be. Watch. It could be like this. 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 Those 4, I just made up 4. Okay, this one here, it's a vertical compression. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
This one here is reflected across the X and a vertical compression. Correct?
Yeah.
Negative, it reflects. Absolute value of that is between 0 and 1. This one here, vertical stretch. It's going to get skinnier. Correct? This one here is going to have a reflection across the x-axis because of the what?
Negative.
And the absolute value of -3 makes it a vertical stretch. Does that help? All the negative does is it reflects it. You still have to take the absolute value to determine if it's a compression or a stretch. Does that make sense? Or no? So if I gave you one like this, y equals opposite 3, absolute value of x minus 4 plus 5. Okay? It's reflected across the x-axis. Correct? Which means I'm going to multiply all the y's by -1, correct? Right? Number 2, that there tells me the absolute value of -3, I do it up here. It's the same thing. The absolute value of -3 is equal to 3, which is greater than 1, right? So it's a vertical what? Stretch, which means it's going to change the shape, isn't it? It's going to make it skinnier. Now, everybody agree with me, right 4, up 5.
Yeah.
Yes or no? Is there a negative in front of the x?
No.
No, so that's it. That means there's no reflected across the y. Is that helping now?
Yeah.
Let me do one more just to make sure.
If there's a number for x.
What?
Or if there's a number for x.
There'll never be, in this class, the only thing that'll be in front of the x is a negative. We will not have, I know you've got one on the absolute value, but we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
We're not going to have it because it's a little screwy. Okay? Does that help now or no?
Yeah.
Because this is not easy stuff, I know. Okay, where am I at here? I got stuff everywhere. See if I can find it. Where was I at? That's 3.
That was it.
No, I had one more. No, it's this one here. There. Okay, now, I know the one you're talking. Okay, this one here, negative means it's reflected across the x, correct?
Yeah.
And then the absolute value of -4 is 4, so it's a vertical what?
Stretch.
Vertical stretch. Now, this is the one he's looking at. So what's the absolute value of 5? So just put it in front like that. This number here is never going to be a fraction in front. It's always going to be in front, okay? It's never going to be inside the parentheses or absolute value because in reality, this one here would be a horizontal shrink. But we're not going to talk about that in here, okay? So this one here is a vertical stretch by a factor of what? 5. Which ones change the shape, kids? Which ones do not change the shape? These right here, correct? Those there don't change the shape of the graph, do they? only these change the shape, correct? Agreed? Because this number, this A is bigger than 1 or less than or equal to 0, agreed? Does that help now? Now get out the worksheet, the first worksheet, okay? All right, this is what I do, okay? Okay, this is what I do. You guys have rulers there.
I gotta look. I was gone. I mean, you can do it.
No. So everybody have worksheet 1, okay? All right, this is how I do it. Okay, it asks for the domain. Were you here yesterday? You can stay awake during class too, right? So you,
I gotta know what to do with it. I don't know to the front.
well, I mean, part of it's my fault because I had you guys all look like a deer in headlights for about 15 minutes. I think, you guys feel better about the transformations finally? Okay.
Yeah.
After I took you a long way around the mountain, and that's my fault. That's not yours. Okay. Okay. This is how I do domain and range, okay? Left to right
66%.
is your domain. Floor to ceiling is your range. And remember, domain is X, range is Y, correct? Agreed?
Yeah.
So what I do with my rulers, I do this. What's the farthest left? -2. Brackets, because it's a point, agreed? What's the farthest X to the right? 7. So let's bracket as well. Okay? Everybody see I did that first, left to right. Now, floor to ceiling. So what's the lowest point? That one right there. So what's the Y value there? 1. So it's 1, correct? Not the X, the Y. And then what's the highest point for Y? 7. Agreed? Everybody see I got that? So put your ruler there where it intersects the x-axis. That's the domain on the left. Where it intersects the x-axis, that's the highest x value. Then to figure your range, where does this ruler intersect the y-axis at? 1 and 7. Does that make sense? Okay, now, increasing, decreasing is from left to right. Agreed? So does everybody agree with me? From left to right, it's increasing here. So what is the y value, or excuse me, what is the x value there? -2. And when you increase or decrease, it's always parentheses. Because it's not increasing or decreasing at that point. Okay? And then what's the x coordinate for this one here? 1. So it's increasing on the interval from -2 to 1. Does that make sense? Now, what's it doing from here to here? Decreasing. So what's the x value here? 1, isn't it? And what's the x value here? 5, correct? Not the y value, the x value. Agreed? Everybody see where I'm getting those? Or just so increasing, decreasing, deal with the x, yeah.
When you get the 1,
So interval from 1 to what? 5. I have to do it that way. In high school, I struggle with this. I mean, I can still remember it. Now, what's it doing here is called a constant. Constant. So, what's the x here? 5, is that right? To what? 7. Correct? Yes or no?
yes.
Okay. This is how I do it, and this is kind of how I taught you today, so let's put our ordered, here's our parent function, what we're starting with, okay? This is negative 2, 1, negative 2, 1, 1, 7, correct? That's that point. 5, 3, and 7, 3. Does everybody agree with me? That's my parent function. Now, that 1/2 is in front, so does everybody agree with me? There's not a negative there, so there's no, so we know that there's not this, correct? There's no reflection, but what does the 1/2 do to the graph? Is it a vertical stretch or shrink?
Compression.
It's a compression, which means it's going to be wider, correct?
Yeah.
Correct? Everything on the outside deals with the y. So I'm going to multiply all these y values by 1/2. That makes sense? So my new graph, I'm going to multiply every one of those y values by 0.5 or 1/2. Okay? So negative 2, 0.5. 1, 3.5. 5, 1.5. 7, 1.5. So I multiplied every one of these y values by 1/2. Okay? Yes or no?
Yes.
So let's graph it. Negative 2.5. 1, 3.5. 5, 1.5. 7, 1.5. Now you can use your ruler and draw your points together if you want. Okay? So this one here was a vertical compression. It got wider. Did it get wider looking?
Yeah.
Okay. Parent function's this. Oh, can anybody, let's look at our domain. Our domain would be negative 2 to 7. Is that correct? Watch. Everybody look up here. Look at the x values here. What's the smallest x value? What's the biggest x value?
7.
What's the smallest y value here? 0.5, correct? What's the biggest y value? 3.5. See how I do that? See how I do that? Smallest x is negative 2. Biggest x is 7. Smallest y is 0.5. Biggest y is what? 3.5. Does that help? Okay, so we got negative 2, 1, 1, 7, 5, 3, 7, 3. That's those points for this one right here, correct? So, does everybody agree with me on this one here? It's going to be a vertical stretch by a factor of 2 and shift it up 1. Vertical stretch, factor of 2. Correct? Shift it up 1. So I'm going to have to multiply all those y values by 2 and then add 1 to them. Yes or no? So, first thing I'm going to do is this. I'm not doing anything to the x's, am I? So I'm going to multiply all those y's by 2. So that's 2, 14, 6, 6. Agreed? Then what am I going to do to the y values? Add 1. Correct? So my final, so this one here, I'm multiplied by 2, and this one here, I'm adding 1. Correct? So, did I do anything to the x? No. Was there anything inside the parentheses? No, so I didn't do anything to the x's. Everything on the outside affects the what? The y. Everything on the inside affects the x. So what am I going to do to all the y's here? I'm going to add 1. So I have 3, 15, 7, 7, correct? Agreed? So now let's scrap it. Negative 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 15. 5, 7. 7, 7. There it is. Okay, what's the smallest x value in our new chart here? Negative 2. What's our largest? 7, correct? On our range, what's our smallest value? 3. What's our largest value? 15. There it is. Is that making sense now, kids?
Do we have to write vertical stretch on this?
If you want. So this one here, you would say vertical stretch. And up 1, correct? Okay, parent function again. Okay. Negative 2, 1. 1, 7. 5, 3. 7, 3. Correct? So what am I going to do this one here? Is there anything on the outside
No.
of those parentheses? No, so I'm not doing anything to the y's, am I? So what am I going to do to the x's? I'm going to subtract 3. Does everybody agree with me on that? Because I'm going to go left 3 here. Because it's always an imposter, isn't it? Agreed? So, my new table, subtract 3. So, negative 5, negative 2, 2, 4. And I'm not going to do any of those, am I? Correct? So I subtracted 3 from all the x values. So now I graph negative 5, 1. Negative 2, 7. 2, 3. 4, 3. And there it is. Okay, so the range or the domain would be negative 5 to 4. Is that right? The biggest value for x is negative 5. Excuse me, the smallest x is negative 5 and the biggest is 4. Is that right? Your range, what's your smallest value is what? What's your smallest value? 1. And what's your biggest value? 7. Okay, let's do this one here. Negative 2, 1. 1, 7, 5, 3, 7, 3. Okay? Does everybody agree with me? This is a vertical compression and shifted right 2. Vertical compression, right 2. So what am I going to do to all the y values? Multiplying by half, correct?
Yeah.
Everything on the outside deals with the y. So I'm going to multiply all those values by half, agreed? So that's going to be 0.5, 3.5, 1.5, 1.5, agreed? I'll multiply everything by the y by 0.5, correct? Or 1/2. Now, what am I going to do to all the x's?
Add two.
Add 2. Correct? Because everything on the inside of the parentheses deals with the x. So I'm going to add 2. So that's 0, 3, 7, 9. Agreed? So let's graph it now. 0.5. 3, 3.5. 7, 1.5. 9, 1.5. There it is. Is this helping or not? Okay, so what's the smallest x value here for the domain?
0.
0. What's the largest? 9. Questions? Got a question? You better ask. That's why your parents are paying my salary. That's why I make the big loot. Looking at the y. What's the smallest y value? 0.5, is that right? What's the largest? 3.5. Turn the page. I'm going to do one more with you, then we're going to go to. Okay, let's do the bottom corner. This one here.
Negative X.
Okay, so parent function was negative 2, 1, 1, 7, 5, 3, is that right? 7, 3, correct? Agreed? You better be watching here. Okay, is there anything on the outside at all? No, so I'm not doing anything to the y's, am I? What does the negative tell me? It's going to be reflected across the y-axis, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which means I'm going to negate or multiply all the x's by what? Negative 1. Agreed? Correct? So this is now going to be positive 2, negative 1, negative 5, negative 7. Am I going to do anything to the y's? No. So let's graph it. 2, 1, negative 1, 7, negative 5, 3, negative 7, 3, which is off the page, isn't it? I'll say it's negative 5, negative 6. We'll say it's right there. So it looks like this. Okay, what's the domain? What's the smallest x values? Negative 7, correct? What's the largest? 2, is that right? Correct? What's the smallest y value? 1. What's the largest y value? 7.